Get what?
and I'll scan your ID card. Okay, so class 6, we're going to look at functions and talk just a bit about modules. But before we do that, let's take a look at a couple of things that we've gone over a little bit earlier. This is, someone had asked, how do you set up the headers on Python? And so if you haven't brought up PyCharm and you want to do it, go ahead and do it. And I went into a little detail. This will be out on D2L this afternoon with the lecture video. So if you want to look at it there, you can. I'll just give you some comments. You go to the settings, to the editor, and then we want to go to File and Code Template. And if you notice here, by default, here are all the different things that we can do within PyCharm. So again, it's a very useful interpreter and tool. And what you want to do is take Python script, and then up at the top, above where Python script is listed, there's a little icon that says Code Template. By the way, plus sign means create a brand new one that's empty. Minus sign means delete whatever you have selected. There's no recovery from the delete. You have to recreate it, so be careful when you use the delete key. So I'll highlight Python script. I'll hit the copy template, and then that will create a copy. Does that look blurry to you all?
A little.
A little bit. No.
Oh, there.
That's not bad.
All right. We'll try that. So it'll create a copy at the bottom of the script list, and it'll say copy Python script. So what you do then is you go ahead and edit that. Now, there's no rename function when it's in the script window. You have to rename it over here where you're doing your operations at. And the way I have mine set up, of course, the number sign is for a comment, so I've got number, boom sign, Python 3. And again, what that tells the interpreter anytime it runs a script, run python3.x, whatever the current version is on the computer, or find python3.x and run it. I've got my name in. I put in spring semester 2017. This is how we do the date. Double bar, date, double bar, equals, and then in quotes, systems date, $, and date. You can do that. And then just for my own, because I try and comment all of my code, I put in a comments block, and I put the default of description in there. And so that way, any script that I open up will come up with that information already preloaded. And you can set it up any way you want to set it up. And you can look at some of the other setups that they have. If we were doing unit testing, there's a whole bunch of different variables that we can look at and pull out. So just a way to make it a little easier on yourself. Since I've asked you to put your name at the top, it's very easy just to put your name in a comment block, and then you don't have to do that again. There's an OK button down here, and once you press that OK button, it'll rename the script in the scripts that are available, and of course it shows you exactly what you have. Now, when you go back out to your project and you want to create a new script file, you'll notice down here that it'll come up. Here's the standard file that's delivered, Python file. And then the modified files will come in at the bottom of your options. And there's Python script Spring 2017. So you can go through and you can modify the template for your Python script should you desire to. And I had several people email and ask about that, so that's how you do it. Next, we talked about the local history function. And remember, in the code window, you right click and it's about 2/3 of the way down, called local history. And I wanted to show you in a little more detail what that looks like. When you click this, it will bring up windows that show your current code, and it'll show the previous code, and usually it'll be the change prior to whatever this code is. And then it will list down all of the different changes that you made. Now, here's the one drawback with this function, and I swear every time I forget it. It has to be on the computer that you're creating the code on. So if I work on my computer over in HES and then bring it here and edit it, I don't have a history. If I remote into the computer over in HES and edit the file, the history comes up. So it's one of those peccadillos. I think I know the question you're going to ask, but go ahead.
If you were to bring it to here, and here it doesn't have a thing, but if you were to bring it back, like, in that same day or whatever.
Yeah, then it'll have just that history that was edited here. Now, the way to get around that is use try and use a thumb drive or a portable hard drive, or save out to Google Drive. And that should preserve your history for you. But again, anytime you edit on a machine where you're not linked into that standard pardon me, drive that you're using, that block of your history will be gone. Okay. They used to tell us out the FAA, don't write any code at home, because then we used a little different history program out of Visual Studio. But if you wrote code at home and didn't type it on your computer in the lab, then there was no record of your origin or any changes that were made.
Not to work at home, right?
We won't go into that. No, they tell you, why don't you come in on Saturday morning and do that project? No. All right. So let's talk about functions and modules. Any questions on any of that stuff? I must say, FAA only had to go in 2 Saturdays, so that wasn't
I
bad.
hear they're good to work for.
If you have an option to do an internship at FAA or an option to work out there, they're a very good place. Also the thing you'll find that people are either leaving Tinker to go to the FAA or leaving the FAA to go to Tinker. And the grass is always greener on the other side of town. And I know people that have done that swap 2 or 3 times. Personally, I'd prefer to drive to Rose State than through the crazy traffic out there at 5:30 in the morning.
Mustang, it's nice.
Yeah, unless you live in Mustang. Although there are some really good Mexican restaurants out there. Fantastic. All right. But let's talk about functions and modules. First of all, modules are in a library, and some of the faculty that you may work with may have different definitions, but the way our class is going to look at it, a module is in a library. And we're going to talk a whole lot more about modules and what's available to you in Python starting next week. A function, on the other hand, for our class is going to live in the program. All right? So if we create a function, we're probably going to use that just in that single script or in that current script. It's script unique, if you will. All right, that's a function. And it probably won't be reused in any form at all. If we could reuse it, then we make it a module and put it in a library. And by the way, you can create your own library or libraries based on things that you do. Ken and I have been talking about steganography and the fact that Python has made some really interesting inroads in steganography. Everybody know what steganography is? Image recognition, planting things inside of images, pulling information out of a picture or a video or whatever. And so I've started to develop my own module library for steganography in Python.
He talked about that in his last class about getting in trouble a few times on that steganography.
Yeah. Let's not go there. Okay, but a function we're going to say probably will not be reused in any form. And so you might be saying, what the heck do we use a function for then? Well, it would be repetitive tasks that we're doing in a script. Now, normally the script won't be 4 or 5 lines long. It's going to be a script maybe that is 100, 200, 300 lines long. But you're going to execute whatever task you define repetitively. Now, the other thing I want you to remember is that we can have as many functions in a script as we want to have. All right? If we want to write several different functions to do several different options, we can do that. As an example, a good function is a menu because you're always going to go back to that menu. Any kind of unique calculations that you want to make. Maybe you're looking at a cash register program and you want to set up a function for the different tax brackets that you have. Well, that might be a good way, a function would be a good way to do those calculations. And similar things like that. Some more function facts. It begins with the reserved word DEF, lowercase. Internal variables are for local use only. Let's establish that part first. If I create a string, a digital, or an integer, a float, a hex, whatever, variable inside a function, that's considered a local variable. Local variable means outside that function, if you typed in the variable name, Python is going to tell you, that doesn't exist. What are you talking about? Yeah. Now, there are ways using a return function that we can use the value of that variable. All right, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Another option that we have is something called a global variable. And we can declare a global variable at the beginning of our script and then use that variable to put data in and out of functions, to update, and so on. However, current Python culture says that's a bad move. Don't use global variables unless it's absolutely necessary. There are other ways to do that. So keep that in mind. In fact, to the point, I'm not even going to teach you global variables. So we said we could return values. And I said, if you look in the book and you look online, they'll tell you can only return one value. And that's true. Let's say that we do a function and we want to create the cost of a good based on a certain tax percentage. Well, we could return that tax percentage. However, there's a little caveat there that we can look at. If I create a list, I could return the list back, which means I could return how many? Everything that's on the list. But the list is one value. Okay, so there are some little cheats, shall we say, within there, but normally if you'd be asked on an in-class quiz, how many values can you return? The answer is one value. Okay, and that kind of covers everything. This computer is really, I swear never mind. I won't, it'd be on tape. I won't say it. Okay, optional. Now, we're going to get more into docstrings when we get into starting to write our modules next week. But a docstring is a definition about what a function does. And what's unique about docstrings is that we can actually call those from a function or call those from a library. And basically, it would print out the function or module name and print out the docstring on what it does. So if you wanted to go through a library and find out what everything does, assuming there is a docstring associated with the function or variable, you could do that. And we'll take a look at doing that in the next couple of weeks. When we send information back to the line of the script that called that function, we use the reserved word return, and we use a parentheses. Now, if we're returning a value, we'd have the value in there. If we put a variable in there, it returns only the value of the variable. It doesn't return the variable. Okay? Now, we have to get back from a function somehow. And so if we have nothing else to do, then we'll just put return parentheses, and that actually returns a null. It returns nothing, but you got to get back to the program somehow. All right. So we do it as a return null. If you haven't done functions and you want to try your hand at one, here's one. Very simple one, and it's a standard function that you might find anywhere, and it's a menu. And so functions go at the beginning of a program. They're looked at for errors, but they're not called. They won't activate until you actually call the function. We'll look at that in a second. But here's a description, a simple function menu, DEF, my menu. We use a parentheses. By the way, we can pass values to functions if we want to. Many times we don't, but that's one way to send a value in. And then that definition line ends with a colon. And then this one is very simple. I've got a print statement, \n is a new line, and \t is a tab. All right, so I put 1 tab, find a number, 2 tab, enter a new number, 3 tab, delete a number, and 0 is exit. Why do I use numbers in my menu? Anybody remember from last semester? Louder, louder, louder.
You select that number to bring up that function?
Right, but why use a number instead of a letter?
Numbers are infinite.
Numbers are infinite, yeah. There's another really simple reason. How many ways can I enter that number?
All kinds of them.
One, because there's no capital.
Yeah, there's no capital, there's no lowercase. So my preference, okay, my peccadillo, if you will, is when I have menu selection items, I make them numbers, because that's less code for me to write. If I made this an A, and I've got an end user that sees the capital A and says, I'm just pressing a lowercase a, well, do I want to upset the user and said, dummy, you made a mistake. You should have pressed whatever. Or Do I write the code to say, okay, take uppercase A or lowercase a, and that takes more time, and then I've got to account for that? It's a whole lot easier to use a number, okay? So, again, that's my peccadillo, my preference. You'll see here that we indent on our function, and then this, if you're not familiar with this, in any print is actually a module, believe it or not. Any module that we use within Python, anytime I want to arbitrarily create a new line, I can do that. So if I'm going to do a menu, I want it to print out this way, and so I can look at each menu item. After I type number, quotation marks, I'm going to hit a carriage return, and it'll just go down to the line. It's an easier way to see your code. If I'd had a problem somewhere, bless you, it'll be easier to find. It'll tell me a line number that I can actually go to. Footnote on that. You can actually set up PyCharm to do that for you automatically based on line length. And we can talk about that later if anybody's interested. But again, that's a technique I use. You don't have to use it. It's fine, but it makes it easier for me to troubleshoot. All right, take a look at line 13. Menu item equals input. Enter a menu number. Quiz question. What type of value am I going to get if I put in just an input statement?
String.
String. Very good. Okay. Remember, if we want an integer back, we put int parentheses, another parentheses, and then input. We could also do the same thing with float. All right. If I ever wanted to absolutely, positively make sure that I get a string value back, even though Python defaults to string, I could use str there and make it. And then line 14, very simple, we're returning the menu item. We're not returning the variable, we're returning the variable value. The code that I would call this from, again, remember, when you create functions, they're the very first things at the beginning of your script. So when I call this function, down here, I'll do menu choice equals my menu. This is my function. This is a variable that's going to contain the string value of whatever I selected in the menu. And then line 17, very simply, is a print statement that says you've selected menu option whatever. Again, for those of you that have not used the .format function before, .format is a way that we can make sure the format of whatever we're printing out is going to remain intact. There are other ways to do it, but it takes additional coding. I'm for simple code, easy to understand. Bracket, 0, .format after the quote marks, and then whatever the variable is that I want to print there. And when we do it that way, Python automatically accounts for spacing and everything else that we need to do. When you use the percent signs and the different alphanumeric characters that indicate different things, you can get confused, you can get messed up, and it can mess up the structure if you're trying to print something out in a logical way. So, this is a function and the two lines that we use the function, and when you take a look at the code, oh my gosh. When you take a look at the code, there's the menu, enter a number 3, you selected menu option 3. Now, we could have continued to function for the menu options and have that do something in the function that we created, or at this point, we could call another function within the program and have it do a delete number. Any questions? Help me.
Now for the print statements, are these like, this is a short way from an if statement in the definition? Like instead of saying like print, if the input equal 1, then, it's just, I don't understand the return of the input.
Oh, okay. Line 8 through 11
Okay.
in the function prints out on your screen. And it's going to look like this,
Yeah.
that part, okay? Then it's going to prompt you, enter a menu number.
Okay.
All right, and you'll enter that number, and that part is right here.
Okay.
And there, I entered 3. So then the only work that this script did is just print the number out.
Okay. Yeah.
So-
It's just, it was.
Okay, yeah.
It's just in my scripts I don't use the return because it sometimes confuse me. Like when I see.
Help me, get over that. You're going to need to use the return going forward.
Yeah.
All right, especially when we get into modules. Good question, though. Anything else? Turn this back on. Okay, the question was, why use the brace 0? Brace 0 is the Python process to say, brace 0 means there's going to be a dot format command at the end of this, in quotes,
And
printout.
whatever the format function or the format variable is going to go in that 0, right?
Right. The first variable in dot format will go with the 0. All right. If I had another variable, we'd have a brace 1. And I could put, if let's say I had two variables that I'm going to report. Let's say I had 2 variables. I could put those variable braces in any order in my print statement. But brace 0 would always be menu choice. Brace 1 would be whatever the other one is. And sometimes for people just starting off with that dot format command, it's hard to understand that even though they have to be in order in dot format, you can use them in any order in your print statement, if that makes sense. Okay? Anything else?
What does the \T stand for?
Backslash T, line 11. That stands for tab.
Okay.
And so the backslash in Python stands for the escape function. And since almost the beginning of computer time, a backslash is good for escape. When we do an escape N, that means a new line. When we do an escape T, that means a tab. So what this is doing is printing
So it's
The-
formatting the print statement.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. It prints the number and then you tab over whatever the preset tab is. In PyCharm, preset tab I think is either 4 or 5.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
In Python, it was 4.
In 4?
Yeah.
Okay. That's for indentation in programs. In printing it could be different. But it doesn't make any difference. It'll tab over X amount of space. Anything else? Good questions. All right, on Tuesday, we're going to start on modules. If you would take a look at chapter 9 about modules in the textbook, just do kind of a quick overview. And the first thing we'll look at is the module libraries and see the extensive amount of libraries that they have. And if I wanted to survey the class, if I said the word pip in conjunction with Python. Would anybody know what that meant?
I remember I used to use it if I want to download something, like a module from Python. I used pip, and I used to use it in command line too. I used to use pip3.
Okay. We'll start off Tuesday going over pip.
Okay.
All right. And actually, it's a really cool tool that probably will not work on your computers here in the lab, but I'll show you how it works. Unfortunately, they don't think students should be able to mess with the operating system. Imagine that.
I've heard you use that term several times,